It's a case that legal experts will be watching closely when it likely heads before the justices.
Major Supreme Court ruling.
Major ruling involving the Second Amendment.
The Supreme Court has just issued a major ruling.
The day everything changed. Imagine waking up one morning to find that your state's laws no longer matter, that everything your lawmakers fought for has been erased with a single signature from the Supreme Court. That's what just happened in America. In a stunning 8-1 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a bold Missouri law designed to block federal gun control. Overnight, millions of gun owners and state governments across the country were left asking the same question. If Washington can overrule us this easily, do states really have any power left? This isn't just about guns. It's about who truly runs America, the states or the federal government. Let's break it down. The Missouri law that sparked a national showdown. Missouri believed it had found the ultimate legal shield to protect gun owners. They passed the Second Amendment Preservation Act, or SAPA, a law that declared all federal gun restrictions invalid within Missouri's borders. Here's how it worked. If any local police officer helped federal agents enforce those gun laws, they'd face a $50,000 fine. Personally, the message was clear. If the ATF knocks, don't answer. At first, it sounded like a bold stand for the Second Amendment, but within months, Missouri's counties were drowning in lawsuits, 47 legal battles costing local taxpayers millions. Sheriffs and deputies didn't know what they could or couldn't do. Federal and state officers stopped cooperating entirely. Missouri hadn't built a wall of protection, they'd built a legal minefield, and soon one of those mines exploded straight into the Supreme Court. How Missouri borrowed from the left and got burned. Here's where the story gets interesting. Missouri didn't come up with this strategy on its own. They borrowed it from the sanctuary city movement, the very same liberal cities that refused to enforce federal immigration laws during the Trump years. From 2015 to 2021, over 560 cities and counties across America declared themselves sanctuaries, blocking ICE from arresting undocumented immigrants. And courts kept siding with them. So Missouri thought, if liberal cities can ignore federal immigration laws, why can't we ignore federal gun laws? They spent more than $340,000 studying those cases, convinced they had discovered a perfect legal model. But there was one tiny fatal difference, and it all came down to a single word. Sanctuary cities said, "We won't help." Missouri said, "These laws are invalid." That one word, invalid, turned cooperation into defiance. And defiance, under the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution, is a line no state can cross. Inside the 8-1 Supreme Court decision, when the case reached the Supreme Court, even the most conservative justices didn't hesitate. In an 8-1 ruling, they struck down Missouri's law as unconstitutional. Their message was simple but powerful. States cannot nullify federal law. Period. The decision wasn't really about guns. It was about power. It reaffirmed something most Americans never think about. The Supremacy Clause, buried in Article 6 of the Constitution, says that federal law is the supreme law of the land. Missouri's defense team tried to argue that the federal government can't commandeer state resources, meaning it can't force state officers to enforce federal law. That's true, but Missouri went further. They didn't just refuse to help. They claimed Washington's laws didn't exist in Missouri. That's called nullification, and it hasn't worked since the Civil War. Even the most gun-friendly justices couldn't stand behind that. The lone dissenter, Justice Clarence Thomas. Only one justice disagreed, Clarence Thomas, the court's most senior conservative voice. Thomas's dissent wasn't about supporting Missouri's exact law. It was about protecting a principle, the idea that states should have the freedom to resist federal power when Washington oversteps its bounds. To Thomas, this wasn't a gun case. It was a federalism case. He's been consistent for decades, from healthcare to immigration to gun rights, arguing that states should be the laboratories of democracy, not powerless branches of D.C. Critics say Thomas is isolated, clinging to an outdated vision of states' rights. Supporters call him the last constitutional purist, the justice willing to stand alone when everyone else folds. But this time, his lone vote wasn't enough. The Bruen Revolution and the rise of gun rights. Here's what makes the timing even more dramatic. Just a few years before this decision, the Supreme Court had delivered another historic victory for gun owners. New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruen, 2022. That case changed everything. It ruled that any gun restriction must align with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Judges suddenly had to act like historians, comparing modern gun laws to those from the 1700s. The result? A wave of challenges across the country. Over 450 laws were hit with lawsuits. Bans on guns in churches, parks, and public transit were overturned. So why did Missouri need SOPA when gun rights were already expanding? Because of one agency and three letters that strike fear in gun owners everywhere: ATF. The ATF: fear, power, and a growing backlash. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or ATF, has become one of the most controversial agencies in America. In 2023, it conducted nearly 38,000 inspections, up more than 300% since 2016. Many gun shops had their licenses revoked for what they say were minor paperwork errors. Then came new redefinitions. Bump stocks became machine guns. Frames and receivers were reclassified as full firearms. Even homemade gun kits were suddenly illegal. To gun owners, it felt like a slow-motion criminalization of ordinary Americans. Missouri's lawmakers saw the ATF's power growing and decided to fight back. But in doing so, they gave the federal government the perfect opportunity to reinforce its dominance. The Supremacy Clause, the line you can't cross. At the heart of it all lies 68 words written more than 2 centuries ago. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land. That's the Supremacy Clause, and it's why Missouri lost. The state could have said, "We refuse to participate." Instead, it declared, "Federal gun laws don't apply here." Those 5 extra words crossed the line from resistance to rebellion, and no Supreme Court, no matter how conservative, was going to endorse that. If Missouri had worded its law differently, it might have survived. 5-word, and America's balance of power could have changed forever. The bigger picture, a test of American federalism. This decision wasn't just about Missouri. It was a warning shot to every state considering similar laws. If the court had sided with Missouri, conservative states could have nullified environmental laws, while liberal states could have ignored immigration enforcement. In other words, the country could have fractured into 50 separate legal systems, each one rewriting the Constitution in its own image. That's why even the court's most right-leaning justices voted against Missouri. They weren't protecting gun laws, they were protecting national unity. What comes next for states' rights? Missouri lost this battle, but the war over state sovereignty is far from over. Other states are already crafting new versions of Second Amendment sanctuary laws, ones that don't directly challenge federal supremacy, but still limit cooperation with Washington. Legal experts believe this decision will define the next decade of constitutional battles, from gun rights to abortion, from immigration to environmental policy. The Supreme Court has drawn the boundaries, but as history shows, states will always look for the cracks. The fight isn't over. So what does this all mean for you? It means the line between freedom and federal control just got a little clearer and a lot thinner. Missouri's defeat isn't the end of the gun rights movement. It's the start of a new phase, one fought not just with bullets or ballots, but with legal precision. Because in America, power doesn't just shift in elections, it shifts in courtrooms. One ruling, one word, one decision at a time. And this one? It just changed the rules of the game.